Thank you very much for joining us today. If you can have a seat, please, and so that we can start. Thank you very much. And there are people online as well, so we need to be a bit mindful of the noise in the room. My name is Nathan Dufour. I work for Zero Waste Europe, the reuse systems manager there, and lead of the European project you might have heard of, which is the Reuse Vanguard project. I'm very glad to be here and being one of the hosts of this press conference and networking event. Thank you very much for joining. Also online, thank you very much everyone for joining us for the launch of this market analysis and monitoring type of initiative, to put it bluntly. I'm not going to be the one who will be presenting it, but I will give you just an overview, contextualize it a little bit and connect it to broader issues. So it's going to be a bit of a funnel approach with this panel. Just for the sake of it, I'm going to briefly introduce each other here. So as I say, work for Zero Waste Europe. This is Yara Beckman-Reis, who works for New ERA, the New European Reuse Alliance. Should say a few words about it. And then we have Marcel, who works for Planet Reuse, co-founder of Planet Reuse, and also for KIDV, which is the Netherlands Sustainable Packaging Institute, right? Okay, I get it right. Thank you. And then there is Francois as well, who is one of the consultants who did a tremendous work putting this forward as well, and works for and co-founded Enough Plastics. So just in terms of proceeding and agenda, very briefly. So we'll start, as I say, with the welcome and contextualization with myself and Yara. And then we'll move on with reusable packaging, need for more public data with Marcel, and presenting the reuse barometer itself in terms of key learnings and market trends, and that would be with Francois, and then some conclusions. All this will take about 40 minutes. We'll then give about 20-25 minutes, depending on ideas, for the Q&A, also for online people. And then we'll move on with snacks and networking, the best one. But please stay for the networking and the snack part. I think it's part of this exercise. So moving forward, that's AI generated. Obviously, I started with the idiom of an elephant in the room, that type of thing, which is very classic. Everyone knows it, and then connecting it to the waste issue and materials depletion, then it produces this. An elephant in the midst of an ocean of trash. Which is, I think, important to keep in mind what the connection with this initiative and this broader picture. The broader picture is something that Zero Waste Europe has been working quite a lot in recent years about the connection between the net zero agenda and then the current materials consumption pattern. And there is a big problem there, obviously. We all know about that. That's the elephant in the room exercise. But very quickly, you can see on this graph that the business as usual, which is shown by the dark dots going up and up to the sky, is just not possible. And by 2028, the material consumption projected will exhaust the carbon budget that is available in the Paris Agreement. So now I want to connect this topic with the next one, which is the one of today, or almost, the packaging problem. The packaging problem is one that has led the EU legislators, as you know, to focus extensively in recent years on packaging waste regulation. Very hot topic, very discussed one, and lobbied one. And in here, you can see as well the projected growth. It's just, again, business as usual is not possible. The graph here doesn't say it, but if you look at the European Commission baseline and all the documentation it produced before getting into the PPWR negotiations, you can see there is a projection of 19% increase by 2030 in terms of packaging waste. While actually now we are trying to, and we have to, reduce this. So how do we reduce this? I wanted for once not to be the one saying it, not be Zero Waste Europe and allies saying it, but just to quote you something very recent from the Bruegel Institute and the latest policy brief from September 2024, where they say it expressly, and I'll just quote them. A powerful way to improve resource efficiency is to increase circularity, so that fewer resources are used to meet the same level of human need. This can be done by extending the duration of use and the reuse of materials, and by reducing resource demand from the start, and by designing products and systems for optimal efficiency. Lastly, and I think this brings it to the point I wanted to make before passing it to Yara, it's the transition is going to happen. We know it's happening currently, and the Reuse Barometer will tell you that. And so the question is not if, but it's how the transition. And the how is very much important, and we need to gather more data for this. I wanted to briefly show what's the current state of mind now when it comes to recycling. Recycling is one of the two faces of the same coin with reuse. But recycling is clearly not delivered. And it's not recycling that will save us. All the 27 member states are failing in terms of collection and recycling targets and are facing infringement procedure. This is something that is absolutely massive. And the worst of it is that it's actually linked to objectives back to 28. So it's been 16 years, I'm calculating well, 16 years that we've been crossing those targets, or actually missing those targets. Great news, finishing on this, new EU legislation, national legislation, pushing for reduction and reuse. We now have reduction targets, but now again, how do we get there? It's still not quite clear in the current legislation, so we need something more. And I think the fellow panelists will tell you about this. Hundreds of startups, consumer good companies, but also cities starting to invest heavily in reuse and reuse systems, and are figuring out now how to scale up, and we're there to try to help them to achieve that. And then last but not least, we Zero Waste Europe, we really support this initiative. Why? Because we do believe that the next steps is bring more information, better information for decision makers and investors, so that they have a proper baseline actually to support current trends and to have the transition to be a bit smoother, so to say. So that's in a nutshell. I'm glad to pass the floor on to Yara.
Thank you, Antoine. Does this work? Oh wow, I love technology. So I work for New Era, which is the New European Reuse Alliance. And at New Era, we represent a diverse range of members within different market segments and within different activities within the value chain. And we have a very clear mission, which is a world of packaging that's reusable, convenient, and sustainable for all. And a large part of our work really does center around advocacy, but we have a few issues. One of them being data gap. So when we go forward to do our advocacy, we don't have sufficient numbers and data in order to inform policymakers of the importance of the work that we're trying to push forward. So for example, how do reuse systems contribute and in which ways? So we know, for example, that there are, and I'm not going to bore you with the statistics of the economic, environmental, and social, which is missing on my slide, there we go. But you can see that there are very promising statistics for what is circular economy at large and reuse in particular. So just as an example, according to the World Economic Forum, the net benefit of the circular economy is $4.5 trillion US by 2030. And in terms of environmental benefits, reuse can cut plastic pollution by 30% by 2040. And not to forget, according to UNEP, 1.4 million jobs in the plastic sector could be created by 2040. So this is great. This means that if we continue to go towards this circular economy and reuse industry route, we would be able to achieve all of these promising numbers. So the forecast is clear, but there's a current data gap because we don't actually know what the current reuse landscape is. So how are we going to get to this promising future if we don't actually know where we stand? So My colleagues were present at INC4 for the negotiation of the Global Plastics Treaty, and they realized that they needed information in order to be able to talk to different member states and the delegates who were actually influencing the negotiations. We didn't have a lot of the data that we needed in order to really do the proper lobbying or advocacy to push for more ambitious framework at the global level. So we did an internal sort of barometer for our members. And the message that I'm trying to give you here is there are existing reuse solutions that are very successful. So I won't bore you again with the details, but if you look at the slides, you can see, for example, Reuse has over 60 million euros in turnover, and Corplex has over 168 million in turnover. So this is telling us that reuse solutions exist, they can be well designed, and they can be scalable and scalable. So again, as I mentioned, we know what the future can look like, but we need something that's going to give us insights for today. So what's the current state of play of reusable packaging? What challenges are being faced? And what conditions are needed to make reuse systems thrive? So for New Era, this is a really important initiative that we support because we support research and collaboration in order to create the foundation that we need to make reuse systems scalable, know what the conditions are to have well-designed reuse systems as well. So that's it on my part. All to say, we know where we're going, but we can't get there if we don't have the data.
You. Hi everyone, nice to see you all. Familiar faces, everyone online. I don't know who you are, but welcome. Yeah, we'll send the slides to you afterwards anyway, because I'm gonna try and temper myself. This is a topic I'm quite enthusiastic about, and when I get enthusiastic, I talk quite quickly. So I'll slow myself down a tiny bit. Right, I'm here today to present Planet Reuse, the platform and network for reusable packaging that we started building in 2021, right? Some more founders in the room. And tiny bit of a background, I'm a packaging technologist for 20 plus years, having worked in the fast moving consumer goods industry all that time. And sustainability in packaging development was almost a swear word because it costs money, and obviously it's part of what big businesses like. That has changed, fortunately, that's a good thing, but reuse still is definitely not very much on the agenda. Single use is very much the default, and we aim to change that. So while Planet Reuse is not answering the why should we move to reuse, we kind of feel that that's carried by lots of other organizations, but we really pragmatically want to help organizations. How do we switch to reuse? It's not that easy. If all your supply chains are built on single-use packaging, including the waste at the very end, it's not so easy to switch to that from a financial perspective, but also just organizationally. So, very quickly, this is the team. We're a small team. It's an online platform and it's a network. Those two elements come together quite closely. We're 1,250 members. It's tiny, but it's a very dedicated packaging expert and those interested in reusable packaging, I have to say. So we see more and more organizations signing up to the platform to connect, posting the reuse solutions. We believe part of the problem, I guess, is the solution is showcase visibility of reuse solutions, and the second element being showcase how to make them successful. And there are definitely successful reuse companies out there, often lingering in anonymity. Is that a word? Anonymous. Anywho, you see more and more countries joining the network, which is good. Reuse extends borders, and the activity that I've been doing in the Knowledge Institute on reuse that I started focusing on in 2019, it very quickly exceeded the borders, not only because the Netherlands is a tiny country and a lot of these companies, they're active everywhere, but because the topic is just too big to tackle alone. Whether you're the world's largest food company or the largest country even, you still need to collaborate. Right, so having said that, and marking this for those interested in the room, we are a non-profit organization with a bit of support from the institute that I work for, which is part of the EPR organization in the Netherlands, which is called Verpakt. And we receive, as you can see at the bottom, a bit of funding from the German Ministry for the Environment to push the topic into part of Europe that don't work yet so much on reuse. Right, I'm just checking the time. 4 minutes. Is the speed okay? Can you follow what I'm saying? Yeah, okay. The thing is, you always see people nodding. You never see people like. I'm guessing it. Anywho, we support the transition to reusable packaging by providing the single point of information and contact in Europe. Obviously, there's 2 more here in the room, but back when we started this, it wasn't too obvious yet. So I'm happy that the reuse community is growing and professionalizing for sure. We gather, generate, and disseminate knowledge that we share on the platform, but also through webinars, reports, and insight sessions. We support and proactively build actually reuse communities throughout Europe. Some countries thrive already on the topic because they have either governments pushing for reuse or just a bunch of reuse enthusiasts driving it, but quite a few countries don't very much know about it or even focus on it. Important point, I think, is connecting solution providers on reusable packaging with those in search of it. They don't know yet that they're searching for it. And that's not only the providers of the packaging itself, but particularly all the solutions behind it, be it logistics, be it cleaning, be it the IT backbone of reuse systems. There's a lot of unknowns that people, they don't even know when you start looking into reusables. You need to think about all kinds of other things that we didn't have to do in the past. It's the bliss of single-use packaging, right? When it's empty, we toss it out and somebody takes care of it, or nature tries to also. Not anymore. So we facilitate networking, insight sharing. We do this through webinars, workshops, and sessions where we connect solution providers to each other to learn from one another, but certainly also to those that are looking for solutions. To round this one off, we offer our expertise on a non-profit basis, just so you know. There's the good thing is also this section is growing. The consultancies, like plastic, that is trying to push the target, but it's becoming there also a mature market. So more and more larger consultancy companies are embracing the topic, which means it's again becoming more mature. Well, there was another one. We'll be starting online training process in reusable packaging, the Reuse Academy. This is where the promo bit ends. Right. So rounding off and just showcasing a little bit what's on the platform. We've got the insight sections where we try to do a monthly webinar on a topic that's either by request from the members or that we notice is something that needs to be addressed. We have a library with lots of studies and insights that we try to post fact-based and scientific reports. It's a tricky thing because as some of you know, particularly when it comes to LCAs, life cycle analyses, it's quite easy to steer them both ways. So we believe in a pragmatic approach and a fact-driven approach, meaning we're not just dogmatically pushing reuse everywhere, but we're also not so critical as to kill the bug. I mentioned the marketplace. We're setting up hubs in different countries throughout Europe to kind of connect reuse enthusiasts and solution providers. And then rounding it off before I hand it over to my colleague to the left, François, why do we at the reuse thing is an important thing to do? Having worked on the topic of reuse for some time now, I've had the pleasure to see the community grow and the market become more mature. But unlike single-use packaging market, where there's a thriving sector of data gatherers that send out expensive reports for those that need to make decisions, there isn't really such a thing as reuse. So we want to support decision makers, and we want to demystify the discussion around reuse. So it's not reuse is always better, as some people tend to believe, but at the same time, there is a big gap between single use and all the benefits that it's been having for decades, I would say, versus what we try to do with reuse now. So more and better data-driven insights for decision makers, whether it is policymakers, whether it is in companies, investors. We want to help define ambitious yet realistic targets, provide neutral, fact-based reuse meta figures, I would say. So it's in my case, as a packaging technologist, I really like to understand which materials work and which materials don't, which materials handle themselves well in repeated washing or not, and what do we see consumers responding to that. So the LCAs that I mentioned, market-based numbers there, and That's my cue. Sorry then. So good at taking cues. So we highlight best-in-class reuse businesses to really also showcase that it is no longer only a, how shall I put this politely, tree hugging hobby, reuse, but it can actually save a lot of money and resources, which is the full reason why we try to push this stuff. I didn't believe that. Not in every packaging solution, but in lots it can be, if we want it to be. This is also a choice. Finally, we want to showcase investment opportunities and results, and we therefore wholeheartedly support and adopt and host the next editions of the Reuse Barometer that so gallantly has been kickstarted by the lights and so on.
Thanks. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the very good introduction. Now we dig in the conclusions of the Reuse Barometer and the key takeaways of this presentation. So maybe a very short overview of the Reuse Barometer. So it concerns three sectors: takeaway, e-commerce, and retail. We also try to include other sectors such as transport, packaging using the B2B sector. We just had fewer answers from the other sectors, so we were really able to concentrate on those three key areas: takeaway, retail, and e-commerce, and we would love to further to include additional sectors in the next editions of the barometers. We do our best to have answers from other sectors. In order to run this barometer, we identified around 380 solutions throughout Europe, and we sent a survey to all of them, and we got around 25% of answers, so around 90 solutions. So all of the results of this paper are drawn from the economic, social, and environmental insights of those 90 solutions. I will go through three main takeaways of the Reuse Barometer. You can find much more information in the report, and I strongly advise that you have a look at it after your conference. So the first main insight is the fact that reuse is a growing and vivid industry. Maybe three figures around it. We have seen that 78% of the solutions we have interviewed have been created since 2019. So it's also because the three sectors we work in, we have been working on are more recent, but they are thriving because a lot of solutions are being created there every year. And I think the next barometer will also highlight all of the solutions created in 2024. It's vivid because 70% of the solutions have already raised funds or are planning to raise funds by 2025. And we see that the average amount is around 3 to 5 million euros per solution. And so this is about the 90 solutions we have interviewed. If we extrapolate this figure to the 381 solutions we have mapped in Europe, we see that there is a funding need of around 835 million euros by 2025 to enable the solutions to grow and scale. Maybe one concrete example, we have Le Fourgon in France. It's a solution that has been created in 2021. It delivers products sold in reusable packaging, mostly beverage, but also some food, directly to the client, and then it collects once the product is empty at the next delivery, then we collect the packaging for it to be cleaned and reused. When it has been created in 2021, it employed 150 people. Now it employs 300 people, and it plans to recruit 100 people by 2025. What's interesting here is that this kind of business model really depends upon people for the deliveries. And what's interesting here as well is that Le Fourgon doesn't freelance anyone. It really recruits So those are long-term jobs. So this was the first insight. The second one, which is quite interesting, is the fact that the solutions we have interviewed are showing very high return rates. And so that shows that the consumers that use those reuse solutions are very engaged. And they want to make sure that these solutions can work, and if we want the solutions to be viable both economically and environmentally, the packaging has to be returned. And another point is, usually people say that reuse doesn't work because no one wants to give back the packaging. At least we have some stats now that show the opposite, so that's really promising. One very interesting case study indeed is Vital. So the solution provides reusable packaging for takeaway. So for restaurants, they provide both packaging both for food and for drinks. What's interesting here is that they make sure that they provide experiences to the consumers that really fit their journey, the way they consume. So there are different ways the consumer can bring back the packaging, either at the counter, either through automated RVMs, return vending machines. And Vital, even though they work with 11 countries in Europe, even though they work with around more than 7,000 partners, that can be restaurants or bars, they still have a 99% return rate. So that's super high. And what's interesting also is that the packaging are handed back in average within 5 days. So that's great because even in different countries, the consumers might consume differently, but anyway, Vital is able to provide a consumer experience that really fits the needs of consumers and that enable reuse to work well. So now the third main learning is that reuse can become a convenient alternative to single use. That's good to know. Usually, we are told that indeed the reuse requires some more work from a consumer perspective. What we have seen with the barometer is that solutions are really working towards making sure that reuse is as convenient as single use. That the first way when you speak about this, the first thing we have in mind is the fact that reuse should be as cheap as single use. But here, so price is indeed something solutions are working on to make it as cheap as single use or as affordable. But here we also see that solutions are trying to make it also competitive compared to single use in a consumer experience perspective. So a lot of solutions are making sure that the reuse is simple in terms of a consumer journey, in terms of return, both having manual at the counter experience, and also in terms of format. Sometimes the reusable packaging are better than the single-use alternative in terms of formats, more durable and more appealing from a consumer perspective. So the last case study is the SOFU. That's an example I like a lot because it's really trying to fight plastic waste and packaging waste in general. We see that there are a lot of microbreweries emerging throughout Europe in many countries. And the only issue with microbreweries is that those very small brewers can hardly afford to purchase reusable keg. Reusable keg usually costs around 100 euros, sometimes 70 to 80 euros in second hand. So it's quite expensive compared to a single-use plastic keg, which usually costs 15 euros. And it's also it's not only a cost perspective, but also when you purchase a reusable keg, you have to collect it, clean it. So for a microbrewery that wants to sell its product a bit far away, it's very difficult for them to collect it. And the last issue is that the fact that so those breweries really have to rely on single-use kegs, And the only thing is that those scales are in theory recyclable, but in reality they are not, because you need to recycle each part individually. And it's also very costly for those breweries to have the packaging being collected. So usually they are just put in the landfill. And so what Sophie does is that it sells its reusable cake for 14 euros, so €1 less compared to the price of a single-use cake. And what's super interesting as well is that the microbrewery can sell its cake wherever it wants. This case is in France, so the microbrewery can sell it wherever in France, and Sophie will collect it and clean it and sell it back to a microbrewery nearby. So it really handles everything, and from the microbrewery perspective, it's as if they were purchasing a single-use thing. So that's all for the case studies. When it comes to the conclusions, it has been said, now the issue, the topic is not if we need reuse or not. The question is really how to make the transition happen. We have seen many positive market trends and solutions. Now we know that scale is key. So we really need to support the solutions to grow. So the call to actions, there are 3 of them. We have a call to action for policymakers, businesses, and investors. So for policymakers, the aim is now there are some legislation coming on reuse, especially the PPWR. Now policymakers should really ensure that those regulations get enforced. And we should also continue bridging the gap to make sure that the regulatory targets we should bridge the gap between those regulatory targets and the actionable data to ensure that there is a fit between the targets and the market reality. When it comes to investors, we have seen that most of the brands and investments are directed to recycling, even though reuse comes second in the 3R hierarchy, so before recycling. So reuse maybe should not be prioritized, but at least it should be a topic that is targeted when it comes to investments and as well. One concrete example is this reuse barometer. We are looking for funds to continue developing the next editions. So if you hear about any potential fundings, please reach out to us. And the last call to action is for businesses. We see that reuse really works when it comes to collaboration in order to create economies of scale and to reduce the cost of reusable packaging. So NGOs, municipalities, businesses should really make out the most of the existing solutions out there, and they should really collaborate and use those solutions that are here today but really need support of businesses to have the necessary volumes to continue existing and growing in the future. So that's all for us. The next part will be Q&A. So please don't hesitate if you have any questions, even online. Please put your questions in the chat.
From speaking, you can state your name and organization.
David Ariano, journalist, Argus Media. 2 questions. One, PPWR. I've seen corrigendum proceed. Are you hearing things that it's just, that legal thing? Because from certain industry voices or whatever you want to say, there's an opportunity to open up things a bit wider. I don't know, is that what you were hearing? And then the second question is the objectives, sort of, when you're talking about, it seems quite macro level. What about us, consumers, paying? So, I live in Flanders. My coal unit has to go to 81 kilos residual waste per year per co-inhabiting, but that's residual waste. So in terms of plastic waste, are you trying for targets, or increasing the cost? It's very cheap to throw plastic waste away. Isn't that another way to go?
Yes, thank you. Do we take a round of questions maybe and then we'll try to maybe someone else in the room? If there's any additional question? Yes, in the back.
Hi, Errol Knight from ABS Insights. I was just wondering regarding the case studies you showed on the barometer. I had a feeling there's a lot of it from France. Is it that there is a lot of reuse cases in the studies that are towards, is it like, how is the geographical dissemination of case studies? Is it quite equal across Europe, or is there like a balance towards, I know, countries with reuse laws like France?
Excellent. That will be for François. Yes. Anyone else in the room or online? Maybe, Sean, I don't know if there is any question online. No? No. Okay, and there is another one. Yes.
Yeah. Anna Waterpool from Post Plus. I was curious to understand a little bit because you looked at different sort of branches, retail retailers. Where do you see biggest scaling potential for some of these solutions? Because I guess the real transition is at very different stages per sector. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes. I think that's another one for François. Yes, the last one maybe, and then we can start answering this first one.
You said you need fiscal measures to make it work. Do you have set out a list of those measures or regulatory measures that you will need to make it work?
Okay, thanks. And I see some people in the room who are able to contribute to the answers as well. So feel free to step in policy, regulatory environment, or implementation type of work as well. And business as well, business models and some in the field of reuse. What do we start with? Do we start with you, Yara?
Yeah, sure. I'll address the first question, and please feel free to jump in, and my colleagues know better than I do, but it's regarding the corrigendum procedure, and that has to, for the PPWR specifically, it has been adopted. It needs to be rubber stamped. But since there's a new members of parliament coming in, usually they would do, let's say, an internal corrigendum procedure where they make sure that they edit all of the text in case there are any, let's say, minor but not substantive issues that need to be corrected. But since there's a new parliament coming in, they externalize the current corrigendum procedure. I don't know if externalize is the right word, but then it becomes part of the process. So it's more only to deal with non-substantive issues, so it wouldn't necessarily reopen the negotiation. I don't know if anybody wants to comment or if my answer was clear enough.
Well, just to reflect a bit the work in that. Yeah, definitely an important part of the single-use packaging industry is trying to precisely reopen some of the debates. This legislation has been one of the most heavily lobbied in the last term, and we believe that there is no room for reopening all this, even though they're going to try. I'm happy to hear if anyone has latest updates. The idea is still to vote this in the plenary in November, and then the council will definitely in December, and therefore the PPWR will be will come to force at the beginning of 2025. We do not expect biggest major changes in terms of content when it comes to the targets or something like that. There may be, some nuances in the way, because there are still some inconsistencies in the current that we have seen. The Commission was planning to organize a stakeholder workshop to address all these gaps. They have postponed it. It was supposed to be in September, and we don't get it for this year. We expect that these inconsistencies and gaps will be addressed at this new text that we'll see light every time. But we do not expect major changes in terms of changing targets and other major things. And obviously, a very important part, as in many other legislation, will come with all the secondary acts that will follow after the regulation, which, sometimes the devil is in the small world. So we obviously need to see how all these, because these are very the overarching objectives, but the reality is how we're gonna make this happen.
Yeah, the devil will be in the details there. I talk a lot to organizations on sustainability in general, but obviously in PPWR, there's a big focus on reuse. And then they ask, well, how are they going to measure this? And oh, there's 50% maximum empty space in e-commerce packages. How will they measure that? I obviously don't have the answers, nor does anybody else. There's no one maybe. That's going to be very important because if you have a bit of legislation, it's who will follow it up, and what happens if they don't abide by it. It's one element, and how to measure it. Really, if you're a packaging expert, you need to get 40% of all transfer packaging and reuse definitions, how to measure this target. So there's going to be lots of questions when/if the PPWR is approved.
So now trying to answer your second question on more the consumer in all this. The thing is, we need to create a condition for change. And if we focus only on consumers as first entry point, then we'll make many mistakes. Because as we can see in other topics, like the smoking ban in public spaces or power-free zones, for instance, no one who is now involved in this and has seen the benefit of this wants to get back towards what used to be the situation before. And I think that's the sort of message we need to give as well. It has to be regulatory sort of driven. We need better regulations, we need better enforcement. Obviously, we've seen that with what I showed before, the 27 member states failing the recycling targets, for instance. So that's not something that is acceptable, provided that we need to transition. We know that we have to do something that benefits the society as a whole. Now the thing is, consumers have a role to play in all this, obviously, and we need to make sure that the redistribution of cost is not something that is again detrimental to them, because that's usually what happens. You have better regulations and so on, and then not naming anyone, but usually bigger companies that have power enough or volumes enough, like they tend to then redistribute that to the consumers, make them pay at the end of the day. We believe this is not fair. There is enough profit that is generated currently to actually favor a transition that does not penalize the end customer. So that's one way of approaching things. But then the feedback from customers is also very important. Once they have seen the benefits from the transition, and I believe they do, car-free zones, smoking bans and stuff like that, reusable packaging, I believe they do it in advance and all this. When there is reuse that is there and well run, they see it immediately, the difference. And I don't want to get back to what used to be the case before. But one thing else is that they can contribute to really help to better design those systems and make sure that the return rates that you were pointing out before, like business, stay around 75%, but go where the economics actually make it really worth, and also environmentally speaking, it's like it's beyond 90–95%. And there are some models that are well designed that actually show that it can work. Not least in Germany, but also in France and so on. I'll let you deal with the geographical distribution of the study. But I hope that's sort of answer your question. Or if you want something complementary. Maybe the next one's on the study itself, yes. Geographical scope.
Yes.
And it was
yes. So I have a few other questions. Yeah, indeed. The German transport sporting needs. We have a bias when it comes to the geographical distribution. One of the bias is the fact that we have floating solutions mostly in Western Europe. So when it comes to the distribution of those 381 solutions we have mapped, we have most of the solutions operating in France, Germany, Belgium, UK, Spain, Netherlands. This is one of the barriers is the fact that in plastic we are a French company. We operate in many countries, not only in Europe, and we try not to be biased, but we indeed have a bias on France. But within Planet Reuse this reuse platform operating throughout Europe, we still see that there are fewer reuse solutions operating in Eastern Europe. It's also why we created program for the reusable East in order to really support the development and scale of the solution in Eastern Europe. So there are definitely solutions happening there. We just need to highlight them a bit more. And so this will really be one of the key targets of the next reuse barometers to really make sure that we are able to highlight solutions in over countries that might be a bit less developed when it comes to reuse.
And François, if I may just compliment on that, this is the first edition. It's a sort of occupy the space type of initiative. We wanted something that can really help us to unlock the potential of, in terms of landscaping exercise, understanding what are the market trends and so on, to better inform decision makers and investors. And I think in that sense, we've done the job. Now the thing is, the second edition, obviously next and the following ones, they need to take that work further in terms of geographical scope. So we are definitely seeking for support when it comes to that. It's working through surveying as well. Questionnaires that are sent to companies and so on. So any help is quite easy actually to provide. I think in this case, contacts and so on. And then another one is in terms of diversity of sectors as well. So when it comes to that, there's also a lot to be done. And many big solutions that exist that are maybe a bit more hidden. I think that Marcel made a point on that. In the automotive industry, in the pharmaceutical one, in many different industries really, then we also need to make an effort to actually get them. And we have a list of contacts, it's just that we had a short period of time to actually do that first edition. So for sure, the second one would be much better in addressing those questions that you had in the back there. I think.
The unsung heroes of reuse, I think, the problem. So they have been around for decades and have built their business case because otherwise they wouldn't be around. So they show that reuse is doable financially and they save lots of resources. And particularly when we have the Corona crisis and all the supply chains disturbed, that's when we started noticing, hey, single use, that's actually a tricky thing. If we depend on selling our sugary drinks, I'm not mentioning names, but those single use bottles. And we can't get those bottles because somebody bought them. That's where reuse really helps. So interestingly enough, geographically and geostrategically, we start understanding that reusable packaging can support not just circular economy as a green hobby again, to put it like that, but also really as a strategic measure to build sturdier supply chains.
Yes, and just to conclude on this, at the end of the barometer, we have listed 7 points on which the barometer should be 7 takeaways to further improve the next editions. If you find anything else, please contact us, and it will be a pleasure to further discuss those points. And to answer the second question, when it comes to retail takeaway and e-commerce and the potential for scaling. What we have asked the solutions if they are profitable or not, and we see that there is a much higher rate of profitable solutions in the retail sector. This is also a sector that has been working on reuse for decades now. Indeed, that there are very mature solutions out there, and so it's a bit easier for solutions to capitalize on the existing infrastructures and know-how in this sector. We see that the takeaway in e-commerce, there are many new solutions, but they are really emerging, and it requires a bit more of change when it comes to corporations or to consumers. Takeaway, there needs to be something new. It really never existed for bars and restaurants. And e-commerce, you also need to push the reuse idea to those big brands that hold the market. So it's a bit more difficult. So yeah, retail, we have a bit fewer companies, but those companies are been there for a long time and are working well. Yeah, that's it.
I think there was a last question, I don't know what will take on mind, but there was one in the back about fiscal and regulatory measures. So we made a big push to get to where we are, which is we have an emerging regulatory framework that is more propitious for reuse, meaning more in line as well with the waste hierarchy and how it should be dealt with. So reuse is prevalent to recycling. Recycling is helping reuse to actually deliver its best. So we needed that exercise to actually get it. Now the thing is, the exercise with the PPWO was not done until the end, in the sense that through the painful negotiations, there were some very big exemptions negotiated, not least by the paper-based industry, for instance, but not only, benefited as well, benefited from some exemptions. And we believe this is not fair for the waste hierarchy in the first place, and then to give a proper chance to the reuse industry to actually thrive and deliver on what is expected from it. So any fiscal and regulatory measures should help to actually give a proper level playing field to reuse. So there are many ways of doing that. One way is to make sure that reuse becomes a default option and not the one that is on the side. We have been testing many things with cities in central stations in some countries. There is one in the central station of Rotterdam, for instance, that took place for 3 months. Very useful feedback learnings from this in the sense of consumer interacting, back to your first question, like consumer interacting with the machines and giving us some feedback, how to improve the process and so on. But the truth is, there is no obligation to use reuse. So they have a choice between both, which is an unfair one. You have plenty of single use, a few reuse put on the side by big brands. And then it's supposed to be, a good level playing field for reuse, and reuse is supposed to deliver under those conditions. That doesn't work like that, obviously. In terms of fiscal measures, we can think about different schemes, like through EPR, for instance. Make sure that actually single use becomes actually more expensive, and that reuse gets a proper say as well from like a pure fiscal cost at the consumer level. Yeah, we could envisage bans as well. Some countries have moved in that direction. I can mention one, Luxembourg, that is planning a ban on single use for takeaway and events, and it's supposed to be coming up in January 2025. It's going to take them longer, most likely, but they've put a step in that direction, and now they need to subsidize and help the reuse industry to actually get ready for those dates and the transitionary period that is needed. Because there is a need for transition. It's not going to happen in a day. It's a proper revolution that we are calling for through reuse in the packaging sector, and that's going to take a little while before we get to the level of having reuse the default for consumers.
Yeah.
Does it answer your question?
Yeah.
I just wanted to add a tiny bit, working under the EPR scheme. One of the things we're exploring is, of course, the bonus malus system, where reuse gets a discount versus single use that gets more heavily taxed, for example. But still, what you still see is that, as you said, this discounts or higher costs is just charged to the consumer. It still doesn't address the massive unbalance between single-use packaging waste versus reusables, because where does the effort come from on reusables? It's the consumer using, right? You need to take your packaging back to the supermarket, or reverse sending, etc. And I always found it a bit interesting that as a society, we fund and organize it seamlessly almost, the collection of single-use packaging waste at my doorstep quite often. And when it comes to reuse, we as a consumer, we have to be intrinsically motivated, have the time to return it, and sometimes physical strength if you have to carry a crate full of 24 empty beer bottles. I'd like to see that reversed. This is something that we in the Netherlands are exploring, and I'm sure France is doing that as well. How can you turn that around and make it easier for reuse to be the norm, also logistically and organizationally, not the other way around? It's like, you can throw away your packaging or whichever waste in many corners of the street, which makes sense because of littering, but it makes single use way too easy. And we even pay for people to collect litter, which is a good thing. But if somebody's picking it up, why do I have to walk 10 more meters to the waste bin, right? And there's some more waste there anyway. Anyway, I'll stop rambling, but I think there's many reasons why We work on several levels to address this, and an alternative collection systems, as are called internally, would not only benefit reuse systems, but also recycling, because that's another element in the room, is plastics in packaging. If we want to have more recycled content, as PPWR also pushes for, we need more dedicated collection streams. Because when you start mixing packaging waste, particularly plastics, contamination is so easily realized, and decontaminating it takes a lot of effort. In fact, I would argue that the European Food Safety Authority will become more strict, not less, in terms of trying to get those targets. So if you would start collecting waste, as I think quite a few countries are doing now, so you put a deposit on single-use plastic PET bottles, so you collect them in store and they're not being reused, but being shredded and put into new bottles. Those can actually be used again. Great solution, which is very, very tiny stream. So I always found it a bit interesting why the single-use industry or recycling industry finds reuse like the enemy. Yeah? So they are opposed. I think they should and could collaborate, because in the end, the reusable packaging needs to be recycled as well. So I'd like to work on getting that message across and then try to tip the scale versus reuse.
Yeah, no, just in other words, reuse and recycle are not mutually exclusive, but complementary. And I think sometimes that's forgotten from the single-use industry.
And in terms of regulatory measures that we have been listening recently, we have a report that was published on the 17th of September, I think, about the cost benefit analysis in the city of Aarhus and in Denmark and Berlin, Germany. And we have a list of, based on that cost benefit analysis, what are the additional measures that are needed to support reuse, at least in the takeaway sector.
Ethan, just looking at the timekeeping
Yes.
thingy and
Maybe last minute from the
audience.
audience.
Just we can take one online.
yeah,
Because actually we have two online. You can see it good time. From Gabrielle Rossi online, she asks if you could explain a little bit more details about the reusable beverage packaging industry, what that looks like in Europe, and then what impacts will that market have, what the reuse targets have on retailers and packaging. So,
And there is a second one as well.
yeah, it's quite long.
It
It just came in. I'll just read it because it's so from Alex Darude. To implement effective eco-modulation on reusable containers, we must obtain accurate declarations from brand owners to the PROs as well. And indeed, offering a one-shot bonus could incentivize larger brands to transition from single-use to reusable packaging with complementary economic and legal measures. And he says it's more of a comment than a question.
Thank you.
I am so.
Thanks.
Okay, do you want to take that one?
Can you repeat the first one?
Yeah, so explain a bit more about the reusable packaging beverage market.
Yeah.
And what impacts all of the reuse targets will have on retailers and packaging.
That's a pretty good question. I don't know if the barometer answers this. I think what's interesting with the barometer is that it's not only the barometer showing it, like there are many solutions in the retail industry providing enabling the reuse of beverage. So usually glass or plastic bottles. I think the impact it has on retailers, it's another topic. It's the topic of enforcing the law or not. If we take the example of France, they are a very strong target when it comes to beverage and reusable packaging in general, but it hasn't pushed retailers to move. They are still selling an increasing number of single-use plastic bottles when single-use plastic beverage bottles. Single plastic bottles, and the only reuse solution that we see, they are only here as a nice to have, as an add-on, but they are not used to replace the use of single-use plastic bottles. So I think the topic is not what are the solutions out there when it comes to beverage. There are existing solutions. existing solutions. It's working well.
And large scale ones.
Yeah, the large scale one. In Germany, there are many of them. For long, it works well. And even though it's another business, like really like a reuse at home model. So the question I think is more like, will the law really be enforced, and will retailers be forced to employ the same single-use plastic bottles, and to say what's out there. It's not what's happening in France, or at least really not now, even though there is a very strong law in France to ask to halve the number of single-use plastic bottles that are sold on the market, and right now the figure is increasing. So yeah, I think it's more a question of enforcing the law, and the question is, will the PPWR will be enforced or not?
And if I may add on this, I think.
And Larissa, then we'll.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think the rates are definitely one of these product categories where we see more use. On one hand, the format of a beverage typically serves well the purpose of reuse systems. You can easily standardize. They have high rotation, so I think it's definitely one of these products where brand owners will see that if well designed, they can have profitable reuse systems at scale. But also, very interestingly, I have heard from different brand owners, Coca-Cola and so on, that they made very ambitious claims when it comes to zero net emissions by 2040. And it turns out that packaging, manufacture of packaging, accounts for 40–50% of the whole environmental footprint, which means definitely that they see reuse as an opportunity there to meet those zero net targets. So definitely, I think beverages, Gabriel, in 5 years, 10 years, way more and more, with the policy driver, which is the PPWR, which sets at 10%, but we're going to see way more because of the economic and the environmental impact that the beverage will have as well.
There's a.
I was going to provide the grade 0 from reuse packaging policy officer. I've been following the PPWR, and so that the sector uses the sector that we have big potential on, one of the sectors with big potential for reuse. And the beginning of the PPWR proposal, the industry back in the industry, they succeeded to drop by half of the target. So before the we have only 20%. And this 10% can ultimately achieve to a pool of economic operators. So with this target alone, maybe a bit tricky to increase the reusable beverage packaging, but the member states, they can set higher targets for that at national level. So that's something that we are looking for, and that's very much needed. And there's no reason why we have just a 10% target for beverage packaging. We need to do that.
Thank you very much. I think we can close here and start with the networking and having a little snack.
Thanks for the online audience. We're probably disconnecting now. Any questions, drop us a line, and please stay.